Welcome everyone, and thank you. The first thing I'd want to say is thank you for joining us on a Sunday. I know time is precious and weekends are precious as well for families, so thank you. My name is Bev Milway. I'm Strategic Lead for SEND and Inclusion in Stockport, and I'm really pleased to be here today. My role kind of is to oversee SEND provision and its and support to families in its widest sense, really, in terms of what we are doing now from schools right the way up to colleges, and what we plan to do going forward next year, next 2 years, next 5 years, next 10 years. So I'm really pleased to be here, not only so we can share some information with yourselves, but also to listen to our families and to our community. So if I just pass you over to Katie, who can introduce herself as well.
Thanks, Bev. And my name's Kate Howard, and I'm a service lead in Stockport Family, and I have a responsibility for our multi-agency safeguarding and support hub. And just echo everything that Bev has said in terms of many thanks for joining today. This is the first time I've done a webinar of this kind, so I'm really pleased to be able to do this. And MASH multi-agency safeguarding support hub. I hope this represents us in the MASH and our role for SEND and our population of SEND across Stockport, and our ambition and aim in making sure that SEND's always our business too.
Brilliant. Okay, Michelle, you wanna? Okay, so I guess the purpose of today's session, and we've got an hour, but it may be that we run over slightly if people are happy with that, is to, I think first and foremost, we've put at the top there, is to listen to yourselves as parents and carers in Stockport. And I'll come on to the co-production charter in a minute, but I'm really clear that myself, Katie, others that work within services and that are shaping services and support options going forward need to really listen and work with our parent carer community. So that's the first thing I really want to be clear on, really. The first kind of couple around, actually, we need to understand as in our roles, and actually where you currently get support from and what you value, and actually what you know as a community in Stockport, what we can do to make sure we've got more of what you value. Listen to current challenges to gaining support. I think this webinar came around from various reasons, but some of the feedback we've had from our parent carer forum packs, but also some feedback we've had from parent groups. So for example, SEND families, around actually people feel still that they've got to fight to get support within Stockport. In some cases they feel that the early help offer, our early help offer isn't very well understood, that people particularly around the MASH, which Kate is going to talk around, which is our front door, which is our kind of way of accessing a lot of the support, or some of the support, is not well understood, and people actually are in some cases are put off ringing, which we really want to talk about today. So it's to kind of understand from yourselves what the challenges are and how we can work together with you to get to kind of meet some of those challenges and look at things in a different way. The next one was to provide a quick overview of what early help is, because actually, I think early help means something to me, might mean something to someone else, and around our SEND community, and actually for Katie to much more kind of provide an overview of what we do at our MASH front door in Stockport. So that was that's the purpose. I hope you kind of that meets what it said on the tin, really. So in terms of the co-production charter, this was, I just really quickly want to go through this. This was our co-production charter has been adopted formally across the system in health, social care and education services. We've now got 120 people, teams, organisations signed up to our co-production charter, including some of our schools, not all of our schools, but some of them. If you go on the local offer website, you can actually search to see who signed up to this co-production charter. And what we will be doing, what I should have said at the start, is we'll be sending these slides out to everyone in this session and making them available on the local offer. And if you click on this slide, it kind of goes into more detail of what the co-production offer is. I know there's a sense, or there could be a sense of, this is just a piece of paper, it's a nice poster that people put on the walls. And what I would say is we are doing work every day, looking at how we make co-production a reality in Stockport. It's something from the highest level, so from Pam Smith as Chief Exec of Stockport Council, right the way down, and with different people and different teams have really embraced it. It is a cultural change, it's a different way of working, so it will take time. You know, some of this won't happen overnight because it's a different way of working for us, but people are taking it on board, and we've got very clear examples of that with specific schools, for example. What we need to do is keep pressing with the co-production charter, and looking at how different ways of implementation, etc. So in terms of our, I don't think I need to go on and go through every aspect of it, but I think some of them are really key to the session today. So actively listen, valuing lived experience. I'm clear in my my professional work, lived experience is key to everything I do and the decisions we make, and to be open and honest. Myself and Katie need to be open and honest with yourselves as our community around some of the challenges we've got, but also some of the things we want to do going forwards. So it's just really to be very clear around that. We will work in a co-production way, and certainly following this, myself and Katie would like to have conversations about how we work together and with yourselves as a group of parents and carers, if you were happy to do that. What I should have said, and it's really remiss of me and I'm sorry, is that if anyone's got any questions throughout this session, please put them in the chat and we will make sure we answer them as we're going along or at the end. So sorry not for doing that. It's, we're not professional webinar deliverers, so we're learning as we go along. Okay, so if we go on to the next one, Michelle. So in terms of what we mean by early help, Katie, do you want to talk through this? Is that okay?
Absolutely. So as Bev has said in the introduction so far, today is very much about wanting to be interactive with you and getting your thoughts. And yeah, please do add comments in the chat. Just to also add as well that if there's any areas that we're not able to fully explore today, Bev and I have got plans following this webinar to have a real good look at the comments within the chat, and if we've not been able to answer anything, then we'll be able to come back to you, but also hopefully feedback to you some products that come out of this webinar from things that you tell us today. So first of all, we just do want to really try and get a little bit interactive and start hearing from yourselves in the chat there around what early help means to you, what that term means to you. I've put on the slide here a statement that we have within our early help strategy about what early help is, and it's we say that early help is the total support that improves their family's resilience and outcomes and reduces the chance of a problem getting worse, and that's what I feel early help represents for me. We've also put there the link to the strategy when we send the webinar out if you did want to look at that any further. But first of all, what would be really helpful just for the next couple of minutes is if you're able to access the chat function on the screen to tell us what early help.
Go on the little dots and then it says chat at the top.
Sarah said there in her experience, early help means going over forms and filling in forms and going over history.
It's a really interesting comment, that, isn't it? Because there is a sense that to get any help, you've got to go to fill a lot of forms in, etc. One thing I've heard around early help previously is around a lot of people think it's around early years, so preschool.
And Faye, your comment there around it should be about being listened to, watching the chat pop up and reading through them. If anybody wants to comment as well or talk through this session, then that's absolutely fine too, if you didn't want to chat or expand on any comment that you've made. Within the chat there, what I picked up is exactly what I see early help to be around: listening to the families, finding out about child's needs and getting support when timely. There's also comments in there around what early help shouldn't be. It shouldn't be painful. Seeking early help shouldn't be painful for anything or just feel as a referral process.
I think the comment Fiona's made is really interesting, isn't it? Having moved to Stockport area 3 years ago, I've lost it now. I was not aware of any support. I only tried mostly to get help through school and much more successfully through our family GP, through doctors. That's really interesting, I think, isn't it?
If we go on through the slides, we'll be able to talk to you around points of access for support around Stockport. Okay, so if we just move on to the next slide, if people are happy with that, we'll keep on this process of adding the chat function or speaking out if you wish. So we've heard there a little bit about what early help may mean to you in your communities, and we just wanted to expand on that a little bit further now in looking at where do you currently access support and what's working well and why. And then B is, what barriers do you feel that there currently is in accessing support and why? And again, if we can use the chat function, or if anybody wants to speak out, then that's also absolutely fine. If you are using the chat function in your comments today, what would be really helpful to us is if you're able to put A and B in your chat, so that when we're looking back at the comments, we know which bit of the slide is being answered.
Someone's put in about access through Facebook groups and other parents, and interestingly, I did a session with some parent carers in the week around some of the work we're doing around inclusion, and you know, we have done a big piece of work called the DSG review in Stockport, and they were kind of saying, and it is really interesting this, that actually it isn't around services, it's about work, you know, parent carers supporting each other. And one of the parents gave the example of a mother and toddler group that they'd been in, that was the best source of support that they'd had, and now they're still, you know, obviously still friends with parents.
And they really are the most sustainable.
Yeah.
When it moves from a piece of support to then a friendship and a sustained relationship with that person who you call in for advice and get more from sometimes than what might feel like a professional referral.
It's an interesting point. Katie, right, refusal to refer, assess, tell MASH will then make contact but don't. That's an interesting one. See, I think that Laura's iPhone's the nail on the head here. It says it's not necessarily professional help or organisations, but more so community brought together by experiences. And it's what we do as an area to support that, isn't it? Because we know you're all very busy as parent carers. We know you've all got additional, you know, work, raising families, let alone the SEN systems, etc. So it's what we do as an area to support that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Without putting more kind of responsibility and onto parent carers. Does that make sense? And I'd be keen to have a discussion around that, really.
And just going back to the comment around, we're told about a referral to the MASH and the MASH didn't get in contact. That shouldn't happen. If the MASH receive a referral, we should always make contact back with the parent or carer. So again, this is about listening to you, and if that is still a live issue for anybody on the call, then I'm more than happy to make contact with anybody individually if there's an outstanding response that you've not received from the MASH for a live issue that still currently feels unresolved.
And I guess that's what I'd say as well. If there is anything as we're going through that anyone families, parents, carers would like to speak to us about in more detail, particularly around your circumstance, then myself and Katie are more than happy to do that, either following this or we can get contact details, etc., and speak to people. Definitely, 100%. That's a positive one. Senko at my boys' school has been incredibly helpful. Access to short breaks is crucial.
Helpful to us in these comments is that we're learning what feels important, what's working well,
yeah.
And to go forward in some of those pain points in the system as well. Okay, so if everybody's happy, we can move on to the next slide, I think.
So what we wanted to do is go through some of the myths around early help, and actually what you know, it's quite interesting to look at it following what you've just said, really, and some of the points you know I've read from the comments were around schools said they couldn't do anything or weren't moving things forward. One of the things I hear quite regularly from parent carers and from other professionals and from people within Stockport is that school have said they can't do anything unless an EHCP is in place. And actually, I'm very clear that isn't the case. And in law, they've got a duty to provide support at SEN support level. So that's the level below EHCP. And there is resource within school budgets to provide that support. Every school and setting by law has to have a SEN coordinator in post. So that's more, you know, people know that as a SENCO, and they have a duty to be providing support to SEN young people and children. So I think it's a really interesting conversation, this, about how we support our schools to make sure that happens. And, you know, it's interesting in the chat, there's some comments around SENCO's been brilliant, the support from schools been brilliant, but we know that isn't the case across the board potentially. And it's how we move that forward in terms of Stockport and my role in that and the role of others in that. So if you want to go on to the next slide.
Just I called you Nina then. I know it's Ben. Sorry, there was a comment there around, so what do we do if a school does say that? Where does that go?
Okay, so so I was going to go through that on the next one. So basically, there's two routes really for that. One route is actually you bring that up with the school themselves. So I would bring that up with the head teacher, but actually with the governors. Every school in Stockport and nationally has got a SEND governor. Now, I think that you know, the council has got a responsibility to our SEND young people in Stockport. I'm very clear about that, and I can talk about what we're doing in regard to our schools and supporting our schools around their SEND agenda. But actually, in terms of individual schools, the management of the school is with the governing body. They are the managers of the school. So every school's got a SEND governor. We've just redone our training to SEND governors and strengthened it in regard to their role and their kind of responsibility in regard to SEND in Stockport. And we have parent carers on that training around lived experience. So my first port of call would be to advise you, if you feel you are not getting the response you need from either the SENCO or the head, to go to that SEND governor. And also actually parent governors as well, obviously are there as to give the parental view on any governing body. And if you feel that you're not getting a response that way, then obviously it would be around making an official representation, a complaint to the governing body. And also, obviously, we've got Sendias who can also help and support. And we're going to do a piece of, I've just been in a discussion with some of our parent carers around needing to do a piece of work around Sendias and the role of Sendias, and actually, you know, supporting around all these, you know, SEN support up to EHCP, for example. The other avenue, I guess, is around the work with myself and others are doing around our schools. So you may have heard of the entitlement framework in Stockport. We launched this a couple of years ago, and this details in great detail really what schools should be doing at SEN support level and at quality first teaching. So for every child in Stockport, what schools should be doing, and then what they should be doing in regard to SEN support, etc. All schools have got this and are working to it. What I would say is we, myself and the head of school effectiveness, Lynn Perry, are working really, really closely together to look at individual schools. So we are having a discussion, our school improvement team are having a discussion with every school in Stockport around this, around SEND and how they are supporting their SEND young people. What we're then doing is marrying that up looking at how feedback we've gained from our parent carers and young people in regard to actually, is that happening? You know, so schools are saying to us X, Y, and Z, but is that happening on the ground? And for schools that there's many schools in Stockport that I'm really proud of their practice around SEND, and there's some brilliant stuff happening. I have to say that, and I have to be really, you know, we have to celebrate that in Stockport. But there are some schools that need a bit of support around SEND and how they support their SEND young people. So when we know that, we can marry, when we've done the discussions with the individual schools and we've spoken to some parent carers around it, we know those schools and we are doing specific work with those schools. I guess what I would say to people on this call and wider is, if there are specific issues, then please let us know as well in terms of specific schools, because we will take that on board with the work we're doing. So I guess what I'm saying is, if there are issues and you feel that school, you're not getting the support that is needed, I would go 2 routes. I would go through the governors. Well, I speak to Senko in the first instance, and we've done a piece of work checking all the school websites in the last couple of weeks around the information that is on there. So there should be very clearly the Senko is on every school website. And then we should, if you feel you're not getting the answers you need, then move that up to the governors. And then obviously, as a local authority, there is a feedback button on the local offer that can be used, or certainly, you know, people can get in touch with myself and other colleagues on the call. Okay.
Just to add there, Bev, I think most of the comments have been answered within there, but the role of large trusts.
Yes.
Is the expectation of the entitlement framework the same?
Yes, it is. The entitlement framework is based on national policy guidance legislation. It's completely the same. I guess the point that and thank you for making that point, it's really useful, Hayley, is in terms of trust academies, it's trustees rather than governors, but it works in the same way in terms of raising those issues. Okay, so the second myth, and actually, I think this is the lived experience that families are often told you can't get any support without a diagnosis, and I'm very clear in law, and part of the reason myself and Katie want to have this session today is around some of these issues. There isn't any need to get a diagnosis to get support at SEN support level or even EHCP. You can claim, you can kind of refer in for an EHCP without any diagnosis at all. It has to be around having a need, and actually what is the need. It's not, a diagnosis isn't needed to get support through SEN support or through an EHCP. I guess what I would say at the moment, and I need to be kind of clear around this, is there are some teams in Stockport that work with specific groups of young people that have a diagnosis. So for example, one example is our autism team in the local authority. So the team that's led by Cheryl Nuffler, to access largely that support, you have to have a diagnosis of autism. What we're doing is, and myself, Cheryl, Katie, others are looking at that, and actually how we longer term move those services into models that mean you don't have to have a diagnosis to get that support. It should be around the need and how that is presenting, because the need as parent carers, and I know this as a parent myself, if you've got a need for support, you've got a need for support. That doesn't matter whether you've got a diagnosis or not, but it may mean a diagnosis for some instances. Mean currently you do get that additional support, but what I want to be clear on is, to get any support, to get SEN support or support through EHCP, a diagnosis is not needed. And we have got teams in Stockport that work with families on a daily basis where you don't have to have a diagnosis. And even the ones you do have to have a diagnosis for, what I'm very clearly saying in this open forum, and by all means I would want parent carers to hold me to account in the next few years, because I'm saying it openly, is that we are looking at how the families that currently only work with those with a diagnosis, how they work in the future. It's a real top priority for us. Now, I can't see that, I'm not very good at multitasking and talking and looking at the chat. So is there any questions around that?
None have come in yet. If I'm right. Yeah.
I mean, I guess the other thing is if you've got a school or a setting saying you need to get a diagnosis before we can give support, then I guess it is around us challenging that together, isn't it? In the routes I've just kind of been through, and actually highlighting that to myself, others, and we can look at that practice going forward, really. Does that? Yeah, okay, so if we want to go on to the next one.
Okay, so I think I'm going to lead on this one, answer there. So the myth that we're hearing a lot in Stockport at the moment is that you have to go to your GP to access mental health support for your child. And I suppose when I look at that statement, I know that that's not an accurate statement, that you can access mental health support in Stockport without having to go to your GP. I think it's also really important to say, and I think it's already come up in one of the chats, is that sometimes your GP might be your best and most trusted relationship between a family and a professional. So whilst we say that you don't have to go to your GP, should your GP be a person that you want to talk around your worries and anxieties, or reach out around what the support is there, your GP in Stockport should be able to talk to you and be able to signpost to support. But it's not the only route into mental health services, particularly non-urgent mental health services as well. Just wondered if there was any, I can't really say that in any bigger way other than we've made a very fundamental change within our MASH over the last couple of months. So it went fully live in April of this year. However, we've been working closely with our GPs beforehand, in that a non-urgent pathway into mental health services has been moved in terms of accessing that mental health support through the MASH. So we now have 2 mental health practitioners, or we have 1 full-time equivalent mental health practitioners, have the establishment for 2 full-time, but we have 2 part-time posts within us, and that's given us a real safe place within the MASH to be able to access clinical overview of presentations where there's low-level mental health, because we absolutely recognise that sometimes it can be considered low level, but it can be getting more towards that risky side. And as social care and ill health colleagues, we need to have that clinical overview within the MASH.
It's interesting, Katie, in the chat that Faye's put off in schools advice is to speak to your GP, which is interesting. And that's some work I guess we need to do at our end, isn't it, around that message?
And I think that's around the culture within Stockport. So I've worked in Stockport since 2002, and my background's social work. So I used to be an allocated social worker for children in Stockport way back when. And that's something that, as a social worker, way back in 2002, 2005 and onwards, as a social worker, if there was a mental health concern, I would ask the family to go to the GP, because I think back then that was how support was accessed. And then it's around how do we communicate the change and that culture of conversation, mental health, thinking about it as an immediate health issue, and asking the family to go and speak to GP. Again, GPs are absolutely able to give support on there. Sorry, just 1 second. I have my son whistling in the background. Giving the look. So yeah, but it is. I think there is a cultural shift there in terms of the conversations. But hopefully today's discussion is about asking, if a parent was to speak to support, to say, well, as a school, you can support me in accessing the support, and also self-referrals through the MASH for low-level, non-urgent mental health support for your own child. Sometimes,
I think it's, yeah. Sorry, Katie. Cool.
No, I was going to say that, particularly with non-urgent presentations, the parent knows the child absolutely best to be able to talk through what they're experiencing at home and what support they feel they need.
Which I guess just backs up some of the comments in the chat in terms of some, Karen's put, Cam's continually refused to see my child. He's having anxiety and school suspects ASD. I'm going around in circles for 6 years and now paying privately. I guess what myself and Katie is saying is that's what we're trying to, that those sort of situations that yourself, Karen, have experienced over the last years, that's what we're trying to sort out and kind of put new ways in, as Katie said, around actually, well, I think Katie's hit the nail on the head in saying, as a parent, you know your child best, yeah? So actually it's around what we can do to make that access easier for parents. And we know we've got a lot of work to do. I'm not going to, I can't say, Katie can't, none of us can say that there isn't a big, we're on a journey with this, but that is one of the things we really want to work on. And the changes we've made into the MASH, which Kate will go through in more detail, all around that and that kind of getting that open access. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do you want to go on to the next slide, Michelle? So I guess this was around some of the sources of support that are open in Stockport at the moment, around emotional wellbeing, that can be accessed, and I'd hope that people know these through the local offer, through the work that have been done to promote them. And I guess it's interesting, isn't it? So if I don't know if you want to talk very briefly, Katie, about the emotional wellbeing hub is on there, but that has slightly changed into our early help offer now and access through the MASH. So
yeah, absolutely. So within the MASH, we as we've said, we've got 2 S's within our MASH, and one of those represents the word support. So we do accept referrals and notifications of information where a family may be in need of support. And that's not just a pathway into a healthy young mind service. As we've said already, sometimes, there's some services that are set up with a service criteria around diagnosis. Healthy young minds and access to that provision is also set up around the service criteria in terms of the level of need that's presenting that requires that service. But there's a whole range of emotional wellbeing and services across Stockport that would be aiming to support children's emotional well-being, and there's a list of those in there. I won't seek to go through them, but I think for me what this slide represents is our ambition to apply the Thrive model from across Greater Manchester, in that there's lots of different services that, whilst the name on the tin might not say an emotional wellbeing service, but they're able to offer emotional wellbeing support to families and improve outcomes. So, one that sticks out for me there is Coos.com, that we know that is being accessed really far and wide across Stockport, and increasing on a quarterly basis when we hear back from our Coos partners in access to that support. That's very much designed around offering access to young people. It's an online platform around a range of topics, whether that's from stress, anxiety, the list is endless in terms of the blogs that are on there, and which can also be some one-to-one online counselling. So it may be that a child is presenting with a need, but Coos is one of those services that might be able to reach out to that family and meet that need. I mean, our hubs on a weekly basis within the MASH, it's named as the Emotional Wellbeing Hub, and we can't quite keep up with the communication here with where we're going. But what we've learned over time is that giving hubs and forums an absolute title for one need is potentially missing out those wider needs in the family. So we actually named that our Early Help Hub now. And the Early Help Hub stands to serve those presenting issues where a need has been identified across SEND, emotional wellbeing, early help, or low-level mental health.
I guess we did have the SEND Hub last year as well, didn't we, as a response to COVID, when a lot of young people weren't in school and weren't in the settings and weren't getting short breaks, which I know is a continued issue for some families. But that emotional wellbeing hub and SEND Hub have now gone into the early help. Let me get it right, Katie. Early help.
Yeah, so it's the MASH Early Help Hub, or MASH Early Help Pathway. And what we want because what we don't want our own system to do is separate family needs off into silos and missing out on those opportunities of having the right support at the right time for the family.
Okay, so if we go on to the next one, I think one of the myths I hear quite a lot is around short break provision, and actually you need to have a social work assessment to gain short break provision, which isn't actually right. A family at any point can ring up the MASH to request a short break at any time. We've got two short break coordinators which actually do a really good job. So Jane and Sean, Shane even, not Sean, who will coordinate with families what the need is. So why do you know what's made why a short break, and how then best to meet that need. I guess if overnight short breaks are needed, so if families are feeling that some short break overnight is needed, then it would need a social work assessment, and the reason for that is to make sure that everything's covered. Obviously an overnight short break is a big step both for families and children to undertake, so that is the reasoning behind that. But I just wanted to kind of get the message out very clearly that to gain a short break you don't need to have a social work assessment. Our short break coordinators can do that. So if you want to go on to the next one, and this is just to really give an overview of in 1920 the amount of short breaks that we undertook in Stockport. Obviously there was a big impact of COVID on this, particularly around overnight short breaks, but we're very clear that we have got we've got some of our providers during COVID, for example, furloughed staff, etc. But we are clear that we've got our support providers and groups, etc., that are willing, are now ready to go, and that we've got staff waiting really to undertake help with short breaks. So it's just really to give an outline for that. And I think there's been something put in the chat around direct payments. It is right in terms of if you want a specific direct payment rather than, so we've got our short breaks that we commission, but if you want a direct payment as a family, you will have to have a social work assessment for that in terms of gaining the direct payment. And I think direct payments and personal budgets are a whole. We are about to launch a new process and procedure for that, and I think probably what we need is a whole new webinar around that and going through that with families, which we can do at another time. So again, a direct payment, I could speak for hours around direct payments and personal budgets. So if we can organise a different session on that, but that is where you've got an assessed need, and you basically have a budget to meet that assessed need that you can basically spend on provision that as a family you feel meets that need that is agreed with ourselves as a council. So I will make sure we have, when we launch the new personal budget process, which is imminently, which I know some people on this call have been involved in actually formulating, that I'll make sure that there's a webinar and that there's a session put on around that. Okay.
Just a question there from Team Ad what's the direct payment?
So that is the amount of money that we would come to an agreement around, following an assessment that this is the amount of money that is needed to meet the need that your family have got, to meet the support needs, and then that money is given to the family every month in terms of to meet the assessed needs and to manage that money themselves. So I think it's a whole, like I've just said, it's a whole different, it can be quite complex, it can seem quite complicated, personal budgets, direct payments, etc. So it isn't complicated, but I think what we probably need is a separate session, and I'm more than happy to organise that and put the word out around that when we launch our new process, which is going to be very soon.
That sounds good, Bevan. I was just thinking then, as you were saying that if anybody felt, as you're listening on the call, an area of interest that may be a good topic focus on as well, moving forward, then that, because we very much want today to be a start of a programme of webinars, and of course we want them to be of interest and topical for what parents are asking. So again, we really welcome your views on that. We put this here in terms of MASH only supports children at risk of harm, and you may have already heard things today that may be demything or busting that myth that the MASH only supports children at risk of harm. But I understand why that feeling or that thought is out there in Stockport. First of all, we call the MASH, we say we've got 2 S's in it, but we say the word safeguarding first before support. That's something that we're doing quite a lot of thought to in Stockport at the moment around how we do that, because again, today is very much about being open and honest. And I understand as a parent in Stockport that if the word safeguarding is mentioned, then you might go into fright mode and think, what does that mean and what does that imply? And this is learning for us in Stockport in how we have communicated as to what the MASH is. And when I say how we have communicated, I don't mean just those people behind the closed doors of the MASH. I mean us as a wider local area around when we have conversations with families around making contact with the MASH. And so, as we've said, the MASH does act as a point of contact for both support and safeguarding. And the reality is that for some children, the MASH is contacted when safeguarding is a concern for a child. So what we mean by safeguarding is that somebody's worried about the welfare of that child, whether that's an immediate welfare or that there's something happening in a family's life that may indicate that their needs may not be met going forward. But that's really those represent as a notification to the MASH alongside those points of access for support for families as well. And as we've talked over the last 12 months, we've really been starting to think around what happens in our MASH when we receive a notification that is not an immediate concern, but that a need has been identified and support is in place. And actually, if I think back around our journey in the MASH and when Ofsted have been to us over time to inspect children's services, what we were told in 2017 was that our MASH was really responsive to safeguarding concerns, but that when non-urgent referrals were received, those ones that represent the support, that our response may not have been as timely. And we really thought quite hard about that, around how do we raise the profile and making sure that equal importance is added to a support notification in the same breath as a safeguarding notification. And that did start what was the Early Help Hub in 2018, that we've expanded the remit of that hub over the last 12-18 months to then thinking around SEND, emotional wellbeing and mental health. When information is received by the MASH, it's reviewed by a team leader, and we have 3 team leaders in the MASH, all who can equally are expert within their field and thinking around that presentation and what pathway that should be taken. And when professionals make referrals as well, they're asked to be very explicit about what is their level of concern for that child. So if for example, colleagues on the call today with a child with SEND need, it should be the professional making that referral is, I'm making contact with the MASH because I feel that the child's in need of this and this, not I'm making contact with the MASH because I've got a concern to the child's welfare. But as I've said, got to be really open and explicit. For some professionals, it's very clear and explicit there's a concern for the child's welfare not at the same time, sometimes at the same time. It's a concept that's quite hard to communicate sometimes, which we can understand why there can be confusion out there. We'll just move to the next slide. And I think what we're trying to represent within this graph here is how when information is received by the MASH, where it goes. This is taken from just a snapshot of 10 days worth of data. So you can see that we're busy as well in terms of the numbers there. But what you can see there is that 241 children, upon immediate notification to the MASH, went down that early help pathway. And that's set aside with the 239 represents a MASH episode. And a MASH episode, in effect, what that means is that the information that you received, you needed to consider whether a child was in need of a statutory social care response. With 241 are those that would be represented as not requiring any statutory social care response, but there's a potential need there that our early help offer should be able to respond to or have a conversation with a parent about. And 112 represents families that have been notified of the MASH, but there was an immediate need that required immediate social care representation. So I'm just hoping that this graph gives you a bit of an idea of the pathways within the MASH, but what can happen at a snapshot. I don't know if it's worth me going, just sorry, as I was talking there, I didn't have a look at the chat, so I'll just very quickly do that. So the MASH used to be just a safeguarding, didn't it? So our MASH has had 2 S's within it, and I've been service leader in MASH now for 6 years, and it's always had 2 S's in it. Before that, we used to have what people may have heard the term a contact centre, and that the contact centre had a pathway direct into social care. So for 6 years, we've very certainly been a combined integrated front door into both safeguarding and support. I think part of why we are where we are is that when professionals have spoke with families, it's been that also not just within our communities, but our professionals have felt that the MASH should only be contacted when there's a safeguarding concern. And this is very much about what today is about, indeed, very open and communicating the breadth of offer within our MASH. And just talking a little bit more around parents' voices on this issue, we have been, we've recently undertaken a review of the MASH, and we've been reaching out to our community and to parents around what are parents telling us about the MASH, what do they feel, what's their experiences been. I think it's really important to say that that when parents have had a referral to the MASH, some parents have said to us they felt worried about that, they felt some level of anxiety. But when they had a response from the MASH, they felt quite reassured, and in some cases, you know, referred to it as being the best help that they've ever had. But one parent has said that MASH means nothing to parents. It's the support that's within it that really matters, and that hopefully today that was what we're trying to explain, that MASH is a name, but there's a whole system that sits behind there, and activity and a range of professionals within the MASH that we can able to call in and consult for expert advice.
Katie, Hayley's someone's asked how you got this feedback. Where's this feedback from?
So we have been undertaking a review of the MASH, and we've been working with the innovation, a company called the Innovation Unit. It's an independent unit that has been speaking directly to parents. So families that have had a referral or a notification to the MASH, when we spoke with them, we've asked, would you be happy to engage in some forward consultation with the parent thereafter? And the parent has agreed, and we've been out and spoke with parents. Does that answer your question?
So interestingly, just before this, we met with a couple of parent carer reps, and he can't be here today, but Martin said it to share around, actually rang the MASH and got a response within an hour and a half. Someone called him and it was really positive. So that's positive to share, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Hayley, you just asked that, so if you haven't had a referral, you can't feedback. It's one of those this is today represents families that may never have had a notification to the MASH, but we're talking with you around what the MASH is. So we're very much building up on our bank of resources, so that when I, as a leader in Stockport Family and service lead for the MASH, if I wanted to think about parent view, not just around after referral, but co-production and how we design and how we represent our service, that I, as a leader, shouldn't be scrabbling around to know what parents speak to. I want to have a community of parents that are my go-to people. that represent all need in Stockport. So, you know, extending that beyond just send parents, but represent a parent in Stockport. So this is a start of making that better. But you know, the fact that we have started to follow up and seek feedback from parents that have had a referral or a notification has been our start of that.
I guess just to echo what Katie's saying, this is I very much see today, and this, you know, session was in a direct response really to concern that have been raised from parent carer groups around around our early help offer and families not knowing or you know, feeling they don't want to ring the MASH, etc. I would see today as a start of some of that conversation, and whether some of yourselves, and we're going to talk about this later on in a little while, around whether some of yourselves would be willing to have that conversation on an ongoing basis with us, really.
Thing we have here is that I have to go to the MASH to get support, and we felt it was important to put this here because we've heard around some of the changes within our MASH and some of the pathways that were strengthened and extended, and for some that's been really welcomed and people are happy about that. But then that message around has been potentially for some interpreted, so now I have to go to the MASH to get support. And that's not an accurate. So what we're saying is that the MASH can be a point of contact, an access point to support, to seek advice and be signposted, but there's other ways of doing that. If we just move to the next slide, then hopefully this may represent that. This is a piece of work that we've been trying to find a way to illustrate where the MASH sits alongside the community offer and sits with our real health services in Stockport, and that not everything is dependent on a MASH notification. So we talked earlier, didn't we, around sometimes support can just be those relationships that you have within community, and that meets your need. That shouldn't mean that, you know, a referral to the MASH doesn't mean that therefore to be able to access that happens. Or many of you have talked today around the support within the school and what the SENCO offer. Getting support from school and from the SENCO offer isn't relying on a MASH notification. But then for some other families, it may be that the MASH is a point of contact, to be able to act as a coordination point, to be able to route that family back into that community support. So the best example that I can give of that is, let's say, for example, we have a young person who's experiencing low mood, and it's a Saturday morning, and the family don't really quite know what to do or where to go, and there's actually concerns that charge increasing. That family may choose their place to go to be A&E. A&E won't necessarily know all those fine relationships that young person may have within their community, within their school. So A&E will notify the MASH of that notification. It wasn't urgent. The child didn't get admitted onto ward, didn't require a high risk Healthy Young Minds led assessment, but that the family, they were given the right advice to be able to manage that Saturday morning, but a notification to the MASH. Now what would happen in that scenario is that the MASH would look at that information, have a conversation with the parent carer. It may be that it's just a flash in the pan point of price on a Saturday morning, but very unlikely. And the family then may be asking, well, how do we avoid being in crisis again in the future? And that's where we'll be calling back into our schools, to our TAS, to our wider health colleagues to be able to support. So that's an example as to how the MASH may be notified, but the community offer hasn't been the immediate point of support. I don't know if that was a good example to give, but again, happy to.
Katie, I'm just conscious people might not know what TAS means. So
yeah, absolutely. So TAS is a acronym for Team Around the School. So every school in Stockport has a team around the school offer. It's a multi-agency offer that Stockport family are part of. And there's linked workers to schools. There's the link school age plus workers, link Mosaic, which is our drug and alcohol service, link, you know, lots of different links, and every school's TAS may look slightly different depending on the level of need within that area. or the level or the relationship with that community. We're working a lot at the moment in Stockport on what our TAS offer looks like to be consistent across the local area. And some of you may have heard the term enhanced TAS, and that's where we're enhancing the current team around the school offer. It might be interesting in the chat really if any parent on the call has heard the term TAS or had any access to support through TAS. I won't seek to answer the question, but it'd just be good through having 20 people or so on the call today.
Myself, and just to let you know as well, myself and colleagues, Kate included, are doing a lot of work around what will that look like in the future. So what will the team around the school, and actually we've got a team around early years as well that go, you know, how do we strengthen that to make sure everyone's working together, and we are due to, you know, bring around strengthening that in terms of some of our services. So for example, primary and secondary jigsaw and their role within the TAS, looking at how our current learning support services, behaviour support services link into the team around the school, and that we are linking everyone in together. And there's, you know, in the next year, there's going to be a lot of work around that, and we are looking at a new inclusion service and reframing some of that work around inclusion and making sure we have that discussion, and that is linked into those team around the school meetings, which we can, you know, again, I'm more than happy to do sessions on and share with our community. Someone's asked, I think, what VCS is.
Yeah, I've just added it in the chat there.
Oh, sorry.
Voluntary community sector. And then there's another question around what around children that are not in school. So in terms of children that aren't in school, they are potentially those harder to reach families, and that I would be saying that that's where the MASH really can come into play, particularly where a child's in a community but not necessarily linked to the community of a school in Stockport. You can also think around, what about children that live in Stockport but attend an out of borough school? And that's where I believe that the MASH plays a really vital role in acting as that point of coordination, because the focus here is around, have we identified the need, and how can that need be best met within the community that the child lives?
There's just some questions in the chat that'd be useful to go through. So what's the time frame for parents for that contact following a notification into the MASH from A&E? So how quickly do parents get contacted following?
Okay, so from a point of contact being made, we have an aim that we generate that contact record, and that contact record has been reviewed by a team leader within 1 working day of the notification being received. If the notification is one where we've identified that family may be in need of support, our time frame that we have is 5 working days to be able to complete that inquiry. If it's one where it's an immediate safeguarding concern, of course, the time frames are much shorter than that.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And then a point's been raised, which I think is a really key point. How do home educated access the equivalent to a TAS? And I think this is an area of work, and I know Sarah's on the call, but it's an area of work that we really need to focus on, because I think at the moment there are gaps in that offer. I'll be perfectly open and honest around that, in terms of we need to strengthen our support around families that choose to home educate or home educate, and I'm more than happy to have those discussions, and there is work that we are looking at around that, which we'll be discussing with our own educated families going forward. So yeah, you're quite right to raise it. I think it is something that we need to really focus on going forward.
Yeah. Just to add, Bev, that I am aware that there is a team around the elected home educated child, and that's led by our EHE team.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is how do we strengthen that further. Again, what we know in Stockport, particularly during COVID, we've seen a sharp rise in our EHE population in Stockport, And from my experience as well with it within the MASH and the notifications that we're receiving now, more notifications that we're receiving for support and responding, is that we have responded to children who've been identified as having a need, and that the parents' choices for the child to be home educated. And actually we've been able to really advocate on behalf of that child that not being in an education setting shouldn't mean that that onward support doesn't happen. So just to give you a very brief example, there was a recent example where we had a young person who was showing some red flags of ADHD, but the pre-referral documentation, who was going to complete that pre-referral documentation, and what we were able to achieve with that is that we identified professionals to support the parent in undertaking the pre-referral documentation that help the young mind that upon completion we will review that information. So that's a really positive example of how the pathway in the MASH is seeking to reach out to those areas within the community that don't naturally fit within existing systems.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a good example, thank you. Someone said I had a TAS meeting 5 years ago, it got me nowhere, which is sorry to hear that. Hopefully we can revisit that if that you want to revisit that, Sue, and you would hope things have also moved on, I'm sure, since that 5 years ago, but we can have that discussion as needed. Is there a service for children struggling to attend school due to anxiety? So we have got a whole schools anxiety toolkit that we launched in Stockport, and there's a toolkit which is on the local offer for parent carers. There's also toolkits for schools in terms of how to support young people who are anxious. I think Hayley's put on, there's also this week we've got a webinar from Primary Jigsaw around parenting anxious children. We have got primary and secondary Jigsaw, which are school-based services which work with young people and children who have got emotional wellbeing issues, and the school can directly refer into those services. So every school's got access to those services in Stockport. So there are services available, Sarah, around anxiety, definitely, and the kind of tools that we've given to schools as well that can be utilised to support. Are there any other comments? Okay, and I guess Laura, that's a really good point around accessing meetings when you're a single parent and working full time. We are mindful of that, and that is part of the co-production charter in terms of getting meetings when best suit people. And when, you know, digital meetings I think are really useful. Obviously we're doing this today, and what we need to do is a system is look at how we can have meetings at different times so people can come. You know, that's very clear. Okay, should we go back to the... Okay, so I wanted to just very quickly go through, and you know, we're not going to, we've run out of time already, haven't we? But I want to make sure that people are very aware of the local offer, and that it is there to support everyone. And you know, we've done a lot of work on the local offer. We've done a lot of work with parent carers on the local offer and young people on the local offer. We've still got work to do in terms of updating certain areas of the local offer, but it is becoming, and every single day there's things going on it. We've got I would really encourage people to have a look on it, and also one of the things I really want to be people to be aware of, there's now on the we've got a lived experience section on the local offer, and there's a feedback button on that, which I really want to kind of promote with parent carers around. Actually, you can feedback on specific services at any point, and that will go straight into our system, and that will be picked up, and that could be a positive feedback, or it could be around a concern. And we need to get that button, we need to get that mechanism promoted as much as possible, really, in terms of getting kind of feedback on an ongoing basis, on a daily basis, about how we're all doing as a system and what we can improve on. So I would encourage people to have a look at the local offer. The other thing is there's a webinar on the local offer that is being led jointly with Space, I think, representatives from Space this week. So again, if anyone has got, I think that will probably be recorded, but there will be opportunity to feed in more into that process. I don't know if you've got anything you want to say, Michelle, about the local offer at this point.
Thanks, Kev. I think the other thing to mention really is that there is a local offer focus group for parent carers that people can get involved in. Obviously, it's not just about navigability, it's about services that people think should be on there as well. So if we think that there are good things happening, I know Send Families have sent through about 3 new providers that weren't originally on the local offer. They've gone on in the last couple of weeks. So it's that kind of feedback as well. Tim Brandwood hosts every fortnight a drop-in session that is the focus group for parent carers. If anyone wants to join that, please do email and get involved. But yeah, the feedback function now is we've got various bits in there. I think Bev's described a couple of them, but that bottom right button on the front page has got varying feedback processes in it. It'd be really helpful if people use that and share it for us. That's probably all.
Can I just echo what you're saying, Michelle, around please let us know of anything that you want on there, that you feel should be on there. You know, it's some really interesting things in the last couple of weeks. We've had back through parent care groups and is around, for example, accessible walks. You know, we become very service focused, but actually what makes a difference to families might be where you can go out for a walk at the weekend, etc. We're currently doing a list of accessible parks in Stockport and around the local area. So anything you feel is missing, that you think that you've used as a family, or there is a really good source of support, then please let us know and we will endeavour to get it on there, because the more we've got on there, the better, really. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry to just go back. There was a question just then in terms of from Donna and Mashan referring some families without a report from school or certain professionals. And I am aware that there is an expectation, particularly for diagnostic pathway, ASD and ADHD, that the pre-referral documentation that is required to be completed. I'm not in a position to say whether that's right, wrong or indifferent, but that is the expectation. What, again, as an example, what we're doing with the MASH when we receive the request for ASD, ADHD is around having those conversations with school around the SEND support plan that's in place in order for the right pre-referral documentation to be completed so it doesn't incur delay for our family. But I am aware that that is an expectation for Healthy Young Minds to consider an ASD, ADHD referral, is that the referral documentation by a professional is required. So we're near at the end now. As Bev said, we have overrun, and I think it's been really helpful, particularly the comments in the chat. One, hopefully that we've been able to be as interactive and answer your questions or queries, but also really there'll be a huge amount of that Bev and I and Michelle can take back of thinking about what's important for you and be able to make sure that we communicate on these issues properly. And so we wanted to end, I don't know if this is a little bit of fun or not, but we're hoping that there'll be some chocolates up for grabs for some people that may want to take part in this. All you need to do is put a comment in the chat. But again, what we've spent a lot of time today around myths and truths around what the MASH is, what the early health offer is, what the SEND support in Stockport is. But focusing particularly on the issue of the MASH and some of the things that I've had the opportunity to talk to you about today. One of the questions that I have is that, do you feel that what we spoke about today, that the name the MASH or the MASH describes about what the support offer is, what the availability of that is, and if it's not, what ideas do you have about that? Again, if you're able to add that to the chat, and if happy, add your email to that, and we'll be in touch.
I guess the other point is, if you've got any specific things you'd like to speak to us about, then please, you know, if you want to hold on, or actually just put in the chat you'd like to speak to us in your contact details.